Zork II, the second of the original Zork Trilogy, was released in 1981. And this one did not have a hints version, as far as I'm aware. Maybe it did, I don't know. And it continues the adventure that was started in Zork 1. Of course, according to it, you only venture down into the Borough with the sword and the lantern. The lantern's gotten a remarkable recharge since then. Yeah. Now, in the first game, your enemy was this thief that would randomly go around and steal stuff from you. This time around, your antagonist was the Wizard of Frobos, who, well, he was a bit senile, I think. And he had a perchance for casting spells that began with a one-word spells that began with the letter F. Yeah, that was tricky, because he would, quote, roam around and wander around like the thief, and you would encounter him, and then he'd, if you didn't get away fast enough or something like that, he'd cast a spell on you that started with the letter F, and you didn't necessarily find out what it was until you tried to do something. I believe some of his spattles one of his spells, he'd use like different kind of spells, like I think sometimes he'd cast on you float, which would make you float up into the air. He could cast a let's see, I think he could probably also cast on you freeze, where you can't move a muscle until you eventually recover. Could probably cast fumble on you too. But basically, these were the kind of things that you would basically, well, it just make you, cause you some problems throughout the game. Now, they would wear off, and then you'd have to move around again and continue with your quest, despite what he's done to you. In this part, of course, once you get through the Borough, you enter into an area where you have your explorations will allow you to find some things. There'll be more treasures in this. The treasures are not necessarily needed, but you will have to get what you need so you can then eventually confront the wizard. It also has some very tricky areas. In fact, some people would say it has one of the hardest puzzles in computer games for non-Americans. Maybe if you're not a big sports fan. There is a place called the Oddly Shaped Room. Yeah, it's designed to be, the path around it. It's like a maze-like area. The path around is basically a baseball diamond. But if you're not familiar with baseball, obviously you're not going to get that. I mean, even I knew about baseball, but I never knew about that. If I haven't said already, this game was released in 1981. So again, it allows you to use your imagination, but it also, well, if you don't have like a walkthrough or anything like that, you really do need maps. And that's what people would do, and that's like I said, this was even the first game was tricky with map making. You also still had the threat of the GRU, which could be dangerous if you if you don't have a light source, or you turn off a light source on the balloon that's in the volcano shaft. Yeah, I died to that one. Because that'll move on you. You also run across a giant dragon, whom you must somehow trick into doing something stupid. Of course, the trick is making it attack itself. And the ever-annoying carousel room. I would not be surprised if somehow J.K. Rowling had used this thing as the inspiration for the entrance into the Department of Mysteries. This room would spin around, and until you found a way to shut it down, you could not be sure which way you were going when you left it. You may have said north, but instead you've actually gone south. And the only way to be sure was to basically double back into this dreaded rotating room. Oh, it was tricky, it was tricky, it was tricky. Now, of course, like other games, and like the first game, there were treasures to be found. Although the treasure hunt could be a bit of a red herring. If you want to get all the points, you get all the treasures. If you want to get done with the game, well, you just got to figure out what you need and what you don't need. Now, as you maneuver through this area, of course, as I said, the wizard will show up from time to time and hinder you in some way. However, your quest is to, of course, defeat the wizard by getting to his lair and taking control of the power he has. So you have to figure out how to do that. And once you do that, you gain his power. Or you basically depower him. You are then able to reach the end of the game by reaching the ending area, which is what appears to be endless stairwell, which will then in turn lead you to Zork 3. Now, this is, of course, long before the time that they had ever considered carryovers from previous games. although they probably would have loved it. But you had to do a lot of. It would have probably been needed a lot of extra coding, which they weren't ready for yet. I mean, true carryover of everything from the first game to the second game doesn't really happen, at least for a few decades. And the capability to transfer stuff easily comes about. I kid you not. I mean, looking at another game that I got reminded of before doing this recording, there were two ways to get everything over. One, linking units to a shit-ass long password. I mean, 6 pages, no, 5 pages of 40 characters, plus a sixth with about maybe 10 to 20 more characters on it. I'm like, holy! It took you about an hour to figure out how to get it all in there. And one mistake literally blew it for you. So you had to be extra careful. But of course, this game was back in the days of the 5 1/4 floppy disks. Where we didn't have a hard drive that stored our startup. Well, you need a floppy disk just to start the computer up too. And if you want to play a different game, well, you got to turn off the computer and put a new disk in. But that was literally the gaming of the day. But Zork is a very endearing series. This was, of course, I believe the max score in this one. Oh, it was either 250 or 350, whichever Zork 1 was. This one was the other. And it was basically what you had to do. And again, it let your imagination do all the work of creating where you are. So use descriptions. Now, of course, with the trickiness of the random enemy popping about, you have to, of course, give some difficulty. Although I don't think you're going to run into too much trouble. Of course, you will have to conserve your lantern's power, which you, of course, can figure out where to use it, where to turn it off, or find another light source. I do not recall what else. There are some areas that are self-illuminating. So, learn to use those to your advantage. Don't get stuck on anything moving with a failing light source or turning it off and the area is dark. It was a fine addition to the game story. Although I think in some cases it was originally, the original trilogy was all three in one thing, but of course limitations of storage space. It was a fun little game. Back in the days when you had to do map making and use your head and memory. Doesn't mean it's a bad game, of course. It means it's a good game. I mean, it's one of the earliest computer game. It's part of one of the earliest computer game franchises or series. And I think that's all I'm going to say about Zork. I mean, it was a fun game. I mean, Zork 2. It was a fun game. You get an urgency, it delivers the same amount of urgency and also a little bit of offbeat humor in there. And like its predecessor, like the first one, when you purchased the game, you had stuff that were on the stuff that came with the game that you had to use. Of course, in this day and age, we have they managed to keep all that and give it to us in a digital format. So if we have to refer to it, we just find a way to make sure we can access it. Like I said, it's a good game. Fine follow up to Zork 1. And of course, when we end Zork 2, we are on a apparently endless stairway to Zork 3. And I'll cover that one soon enough. As always, I thank you for listening. This is Rich Kale here on YouTube, Rich Gen X elsewhere. Thank you for listening again. Please give this video a like, greatly appreciate it, and come check out everything else that's up on the channel. And check out my playthrough of Zork 2. Take care, have fun, bye!